one of the real-life applications of fractions and being able to understand equivalent fractions and simplifying fractions and mixed numbers and improper fractions and all that is reading a ruler. So just measuring things with a ruler with inches. So normal rulers are broken into sixteenths. So that means that there's going to be 16 or 15 rather tick marks between 0 and 1. So on the 16th tick mark you are actually at 1. So it takes 16 tick marks to reach 1, and then for the tick marks, the 1/2 is going to be the longest kind of one in the middle. So it's the 1 is going to be the longest. Okay, so where your counting numbers or your whole numbers are going to be the longest. Okay, and then the next longest after that would be your half marks. Okay, so that way we can kind of see where the halves are. The next longest after that are going to be your fourths. Okay, so remember that 1/2 is the same thing as 2/4. So there's 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and then 4/4 or 1. The next longest after that are going to be the eighths. So that would then be, you'd have 1/8, 2/8, which is the same thing as 1/4, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and then 8/8 would be 1. And then the shortest tick marks would be sixteenths. Some rulers are even broken up into 30 seconds, so really, really tiny, fine increments, but most standard rulers are broken up into sixteenths. Alright, so one of the things that we want to be able to do is, given an object and if we're trying to measure it by looking on the ruler, where did we end up? Alright, so first let's take a look at a couple examples where we just end up with something between 0 and 1. So on this one, I have an arrow pointed at this line right here, which is going to be, again, it's going to be helpful to kind of find your half. Right, so there's my half right there. So the halves are going to be the longest lines kind of in that middle region, and then the next longest lines are your fourths. So this arrow was pointed at one of those next longest lines would be what would be my fourths. So this one then I'm at the fourths for the lines, and then 1/4, 2/4, and then this is 3/4. That's the fastest way to do this, but otherwise we can remember that this whole thing is broken up into sixteenths. So if you wanted to, this is going to be a little bit more painful, but if you wanted to, you could actually just count all the little tiny increments. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I would be at the 12th tick mark where I'd have 16 to get to one whole. And then we could simplify this by dividing 4 out of both of those, and we would end up again at 3/4. Alright, so let's try this one. So for this one, looking at this arrow is pointed at one of the shortest tick marks on here. So the very, very short ones have to be written in terms of sixteenths. There's going to be no other equivalent form for it. Now, if you wanted to, you could just count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to get to there. But we don't necessarily want to always do that, especially if you're measuring a lot of stuff. You want to do it really quickly. So the best way to do this is to remember that the 1/2 mark right here is equivalent to 8/16. Right? Half of 16 is 8. So if I already know this is at 8/16 and I'm going to be one more tick mark past that, then I must be at 9/16. So that's the faster way to kind of figure out where I'm at when I'm doing my measurements. Now those two examples involved proper fractions, so I ended up with a fraction where the numerator was smaller than the denominator, or something between 0 and 1. So let's get into measurements where I get into mixed numbers, so there's going to be a whole part and a fraction part. Alright, so on this next one I have a ruler just out to 6 inches, and my arrow is marked somewhere between 3 and 4. So I know that the whole part is going to be 3, and then the question is, what's the fraction part? So again, for the fraction part, if we can find our half, which is going to be the longest line in between the whole numbers, and then the next series of longest lines are going to be my fourths, and this arrow is actually going to be pointed to one of those fourths, specifically the first of them. So this is going to be then 3 and 1/4. If you had wanted to, you could count all the little tick marks, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm 4 tick marks over where I would need 16 tick marks to reach my next whole. And then simplifying just this fraction part, 4/16 simplifies to 1/4, dividing 4 out of both the numerator and the denominator. All right, so one more example. I encourage you to try this one on your own and then compare it with what I get. And the whole point is being able to do these super fast. All right, so first thing I'm going to notice is I'm between 4 and 5, so my whole part is going to be 4. And then for my arrow, I want to first find my half, and then I'm going to find my fourths, and then this one is at the next longest lines, which are going to be my eighths. All right, so this one is then pointing at one of the eighths tick marks. Okay. And then this one then is going to be the last eighth tick mark before I reach my next hole, so I must be at 7/8. So again, maybe another way to think about it is if you wanted to, you could count all the little tiny tick marks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. All right, so I ended up at 14 tick marks over where I needed 16 to get to the next hole. But then the fraction 14/16 simplifies to 7/8. The key thing though on these types of measurement problems is you don't want to have to sit here and count all the little tick marks. You want to be able to use your benchmarks and be able to kind of figure out the lengths of the lines and where you're at, and be able to use them as a framework for figuring out those fraction parts very quickly.